The howling wind outside the cabin threatened to tear the roof clean off as Hannah Gray clutched her swollen belly, tears streaming down her face. The fire in the hearth had dwindled to embers, barely providing any warmth against the merciless Montana winter of 1879. Her husband, Thomas, had left 3 days ago after their most vicious argument, yet storming out into the brewing blizzard with a cold promise that she was on her own now. Hannah winced as another pain shot through her abdomen. The baby wasn't due for another 2 weeks, but the stress and cold seemed to have other plans. Her water had broken an hour ago, and the contractions were getting closer. She was alone, miles from the nearest neighbor, with a blizzard raging and a baby coming. "Please," she whispered to no one, "please help us." The cabin door rattled violently, startling her. Had Thomas returned? Hope fluttered briefly in her chest before reality crushed it. Thomas wasn't coming back. He'd made that painfully clear when he'd called her a burden and said he never wanted the child growing inside her. The door shook again, harder this time. Hannah reached for the rifle Thomas had left behind, her hands trembling. "Hello." A deep voice called out, barely audible above the screaming wind. "Anybody in there?" Hannah's breath caught in her throat. "Who's there?" she managed to call out. "Name's Finn Blackett, madam. I got caught in this storm, saw the smoke from your chimney. I don't mean no harm, just need shelter till this blizzard passes." Hannah hesitated, another contraction seizing her. She cried out involuntarily, "Madam, are you hurt?" The voice sounded genuinely concerned. Making a split-second decision, Hannah called out, "It's open." The door burst open, bringing a swirl of snow and bitter cold. A tall man wrapped in a heavy coat stumbled in, quickly pushing the door closed behind him. He turned, pushing back his snow-covered hat to reveal a weathered face with kind blue eyes that widened immediately at the sight of her. "Lord Almighty," he breathed, taking in Hannah's condition, the rifle now forgotten at her side as she clutched her belly. "You're having a baby." Hannah nodded, tears forming again. "My husband left 3 days ago, I don't," she gasped as another contraction hit. "I don't know what to do." The stranger Finn moved quickly, dropping his saddlebags and removing his gloves and coat. "What's your name, madam?" "Hannah Gray." "All right, Mrs. Gray. I've helped birth many a foal and even a couple of human babes. We're gonna get through this together, you hear me?" He moved to the fireplace, adding logs and stoking the flames back to life. Hannah watched him warily, another pain making her double over. "Why should I trust you?" Finn turned to her, his expression serious. "Because right now, madam, I'm all you've got." The blizzard howled outside as the night wore on. Finn worked tirelessly, boiling water, gathering clean linens and moving Hannah to the bed. His hands were large but surprisingly gentle as he helped position her. "Where'd you learn to do this?" Hannah gasped between contractions. "My sister was a midwife back in Texas. I rode with her sometimes when the weather was bad, picked up a few things." He smiled reassuringly. "Plus, 5 years on the cattle drives teaches a man to handle just about any emergency." As the night deepened, Hannah's labor intensified. Finn stayed by her side, wiping her brow with a cool cloth, talking her through each contraction, never once complaining or showing disgust at the messy business of childbirth. "You're doing great, Hannah," he encouraged, using her first name without realizing. "I can see the baby's head." One more big push. Hannah gathered her remaining strength, bearing down with everything she had. The pain was blinding, but through it, she felt Finn's steady hand on her knee, heard his calm voice guiding her. With a final, powerful effort, the baby slipped into the world and into Finn's waiting hands. For a moment, the only sound was the howling of the wind outside. Then, a tiny cry broke the silence, the most beautiful sound Hannah had ever heard. It's a boy, Finn announced, his voice thick with emotion. A strong, healthy boy. Tears of joy streamed down Hannah's face as Finn quickly cleaned the infant, wrapped him in a clean blanket, and placed him in her arms. "Hello, little one," she whispered, counting his perfect fingers and toes. She looked up at Finn, who was watching them with a gentle smile. "Thank you. We would have died without you." Finn shook his head, suddenly awkward. "Just happened to be in the right place at the right time, madam." He turned away to wash his hands in the basin he'd prepared. "What will you name him?" Hannah looked down at her son's face. "Matthew, it means gift from God," she hesitated, "and I think his middle name should be Finn." Finn turned, surprise evident on his face. "Mrs. Gray, please," she said softly. "You gave him life, you gave us both life." Outside, the blizzard continued to rage, but inside the small cabin, a new family of sorts had formed in the most unexpected of circumstances. The following morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine blanket of white that sparkled in the sunlight. Hannah awoke to find Finn tending to the fire, the baby swaddled and sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle he had fashioned from a drawer. "You're still here," she said, her voice hoarse from the night before. Finn turned, nodding. "Couldn't very well leave you two alone now, could I?" He brought her a cup of hot tea. "How are you feeling?" "Sore, tired." She accepted the tea gratefully. "But alive, thanks to you." Finn shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I checked your supplies. You're running low on just about everything." "No offense, madam, but your husband didn't leave you in a good situation." Hannah's face hardened at the mention of Thomas. "He didn't want to be a father. Said he married me for companionship, not to be tied down with a child." She looked down at her sleeping son. "When I told him I was keeping the baby no matter what, he started drinking more, getting meaner." Finn's jaw tightened. A man who abandons his wife and child doesn't deserve the name of husband or father. "What about you?" Hannah asked, curious about her unexpected savior. "Do you have a family waiting somewhere?" A shadow crossed Finn's face. "Had a wife once, Sarah. Lost her and our little girl to fever 5 years ago." He poked at the fire. "Been riding from ranch to ranch ever since, never staying in one place too long." Hannah's heart ached for him. "I'm sorry." "Life goes on," he said simply, then changed the subject. "I need to ride to town for supplies. It's about 10 miles from here if I remember the territory right. Will you and the little one be all right for a few hours?" Hannah nodded, though the thought of being alone again frightened her more than she wanted to admit. "I'll be back before dark," Finn promised, seeming to read her thoughts. "Got my word on that." After Finn left, Hannah tended to little Matthew, marveling at his perfect features. He had her nose and mouth, but his eyes, when open, were all Thomas. The thought of her husband brought a mixture of anger and grief. How could he abandon them like this? What kind of man leaves his pregnant wife alone in winter? But then her thoughts turned to Finn. A stranger who had shown more care and concern in one night than Thomas had in months. She didn't know what to make of him, a wandering cowboy with sad eyes and gentle hands. True to his word, Finn returned before sunset, his horse laden with supplies. He'd brought food, medicine, baby items, and even a proper cradle. "The storekeeper's wife sent this along," he explained, setting up the cradle. "Word got around town that there was a new baby out here. Folks were mighty concerned when I told them about your situation." Hannah felt a flush of embarrassment. "What exactly did you tell them?" Finn met her gaze directly. "That a brave woman delivered a healthy baby boy during the worst blizzard I've seen in years. That's all they need to know." His discretion touched her. "Thank you." Finn nodded, then hesitated. "Mrs. Gray, I've been thinking. You can't stay out here alone with a newborn, not with winter setting in proper." "I don't have anywhere else to go," Hannah admitted. "This cabin is all I have. There's a widow in town, Mrs. Sullivan. She takes in boarders, has a room available. The town doctor is nearby too in case the baby needs checking. Finn looked uncomfortable. I've paid for a month's board for you already. Hannah stared at him in shock. You what, Mr. Blackett, I can't accept that. You can and you will, he said firmly. Consider it a gift for little Matthew Finn there. His expression softened. Once you're settled, you can decide what comes next, but at least you'll be safe for now. Why are you doing this? Hannah asked, genuinely puzzled by his generosity. Finn was quiet for a long moment. 5 years ago, when my Sarah and our daughter took sick, there was no one to help us. We were new in town, strangers. By the time I found a doctor willing to come out to our place, it was too late. His voice grew rough. I swore I'd never turn my back on someone who needed help. Not ever. Hannah felt tears welling in her eyes. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. You don't need to, Finn said simply. Just take care of that boy of yours. That'll be payment enough. The next day, Finn helped Hannah pack her meager belongings. The baby was wrapped snugly against the cold for the journey to town. As they were preparing to leave, Hannah took one last look around the cabin she'd called home for the past year. I thought I'd be happy here, she said softly. Thomas promised me a good life when we left Illinois. Finn secured the last bag to the wagon he'd borrowed from town. Sometimes people don't keep their promises, but that doesn't mean you won't find happiness elsewhere. The journey to Willow Creek, Montana, took most of the day. Hannah sat beside Finn on the wagon seat, baby Matthew cradled in her arms. Though the day was clear, the temperature was bitterly cold, and Finn had wrapped them both in heavy blankets. As they traveled, Hannah learned more about her rescuer. Finn Blackett had grown up on a cattle ranch in Texas, had fought briefly for the Confederacy as a very young man, though he claimed to have no stomach for the cause, and had spent the years since his wife's death working as a ranch hand and occasional cattle driver. What brings you to Montana? She asked. Seems far from Texas. Heard they needed experienced hands at the Rockingham Ranch outside of Willow Creek, he explained. Thought I'd try my luck here for a while. As they crested a hill, the small town of Willow Creek came into view, nestled in a valley with mountains rising in the distance. It wasn't much a main street with perhaps 24 buildings, a church steeple rising above the rest, smoke curling from chimneys against the cold blue sky. It's not much, Finn said apologetically, but they're good people, mostly. Mrs. Sullivan's boarding house was a 2-story white clapboard building on the edge of town. The widow herself, a plump, gray-haired woman with kind eyes, hurried out to greet them as Finn helped Hannah down from the wagon. Oh my goodness, come in before you all freeze to death, she exclaimed, ushering them inside. Her eyes widened at the sight of the baby. And this must be the little miracle Mr. Blackett told me about. Born in the middle of that terrible blizzard. Hannah felt overwhelmed by the woman's enthusiastic welcome, but allowed herself to be led to a small but clean bedroom on the first floor. This will be perfect for you and the baby, Mrs. Sullivan explained. No stairs to worry about and close to the kitchen so you'll stay warm. As Mrs. Sullivan fussed over the baby, Hannah turned to Finn, who was standing awkwardly in the doorway. I don't know how to thank you, she said quietly. No need for thanks, Mrs. Gray. You're safe now, and that's what matters. He shifted his weight, suddenly looking every bit the cowboy out of his element in a ladies' boarding house. I'll be staying at the ranch about 5 miles out of town. If you need anything, you're leaving. Hannah asked, surprised by the pang of disappointment she felt. Got to report for work tomorrow, he explained, but I'll check in when I can. Before she could respond, Mrs. Sullivan bustled back. Mr. Blackett, you simply must stay for dinner. I've made a stew, and this poor woman needs a proper meal after what she's been through. Finn looked like he wanted to refuse, but something in Mrs. Sullivan's expression or perhaps in Hannah's eyes changed his mind. "I reckon I could stay for dinner. Thank you, madam." Dinner was served in the boarding house's dining room where Hannah met the other boarders. Mr. Jenkins, an elderly schoolteacher, the Harper sisters, two unmarried women who worked at the town's general store, and Mr. Donovan, a quiet man who kept the books for several businesses in town. The conversation flowed easily, with Mrs. Sullivan doing most of the talking, filling Hannah in on all the town gossip while cooing over baby Matthew, who slept peacefully in a basket beside Hannah's chair. "And what are your plans, Mrs. Gray?" Mr. Jenkins asked kindly. "Will your husband be joining you soon?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Hannah stared at her plate, unsure how to answer. "Mrs. Gray's husband has moved on, sir," Finn said quietly but firmly. "She and the baby will be making a fresh start here in Willow Creek." Mr. Jenkins looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry." "It's all right," Hannah assured him, grateful for Finn's intervention. "It's the truth. I am starting fresh." After dinner, as the other boarders retired to their rooms, Finn prepared to leave. Hannah walked him to the door, baby Matthew in her arms. "The doctor will come by tomorrow to check on you both," Finn told her. "And I've arranged for some credit at the general store, just until you get on your feet." Hannah shook her head in disbelief. "Why are you doing all this for a stranger?" Finn looked down at the baby, a soft expression crossing his weathered features. "Maybe I'm tired of being a stranger myself." He touched the baby's cheek gently with one finger. "Take care of your ma, little man." With that, he tipped his hat and walked out into the cold night, leaving Hannah staring after him, wondering if she'd ever see him again. The next few weeks passed in a blur of adjustment for Hannah. Dr. Peterson, the town physician, pronounced both her and Matthew in excellent health, expressing amazement at the successful birth under such dire circumstances. "You were fortunate Mr. Blackett found you when he did," the doctor remarked. "Not many men would know what to do in such a situation." Hannah found herself thinking about Finn often. He hadn't returned to town as far as she knew, though Mrs. Sullivan occasionally mentioned hearing updates about him from ranch hands who passed through. "Quite a worker, that one," Mrs. Sullivan would say. "The Rocking M is lucky to have him, especially after losing so many hands last season." December gave way to January, and the new year of 1880 began with Hannah still adjusting to her new life. Mrs. Sullivan had become like a mother to her, helping with the baby and teaching Hannah the finer points of cooking and baking. "You'll need to support yourself and that boy eventually," the older woman said practically. "And there's always work for a woman who can cook well." The other boarders had accepted Hannah into their small community without judgment. Mr. Jenkins gave her books to read during the long winter evenings. The Harper sisters brought scraps of fabric for making baby clothes, and even the quiet Mr. Donovan occasionally left small wooden toys he had carved for Matthew. Hannah's relationship with the wider town was more complicated. Some, like Mrs. Peterson, the doctor's wife, welcomed her warmly and invited her to join the church sewing circle. Others whispered behind her back, speculating about her husband's absence and her mysterious arrival with Finn Blackett. One cold January afternoon, Hannah was walking back from the general store, Matthew bundled against her chest, when she heard a familiar voice. "Mrs. Gray." She turned to see Finn Blackett dismounting from his horse outside the feed store. Her heart gave an unexpected leap at the sight of him. "Mr. Blackett," she acknowledged, smiling despite herself. "It's good to see you." He approached, looking somewhat uncomfortable but pleased. "And how's the little one?" he asked, peering at the bundle against her chest. Hannah unwrapped the blanket enough to show Matthew's face. The baby had grown considerably in the month since Finn had last seen him. "Well, look at you," Finn said softly to the baby. "Growing like a weed, aren't you?" "He's thriving," Hannah agreed. "Thanks to you." Finn looked embarrassed. "I just happened along at the right time." "Are you in town for long?" Hannah asked, hoping her voice sounded casual. "Just picking up supplies for the ranch," he explained. "Winter's been hard on the cattle. We lost a few in that last cold snap." An awkward silence fell between them. Hannah wanted to ask him so many things: why he hadn't come to check on them, if he'd thought about them at all, if he might visit properly sometime, but pride kept the words locked inside. "Well," Finn said finally, "I should get on with my errands." "Of course," Hannah said quickly. "It was good to see you." Finn hesitated, then reached out to touch Matthew's cheek gently. "You take care now, both of you." Hannah watched him walk away, a strange emptiness filling her chest. She'd thought of him so often over the past weeks, had even dreamed of him occasionally. In her mind, he'd become something more than the man who delivered her baby. He'd become a symbol of hope, of the kindness that could exist in a world that had often been cruel to her. But clearly, to Finn, she and Matthew were just an obligation he'd fulfilled. A good deed done, nothing more. That evening, as Hannah sat by the fire in Mrs. Sullivan's parlor, the baby sleeping in his cradle beside her, a knock came at the door. Mrs. Sullivan answered it, and Hannah heard the murmur of voices in the hallway before the older woman appeared in the parlor doorway. "You have a visitor, Mrs. Gray," she announced with a knowing smile. "Mr. Blackett has come to call." Hannah's heart skipped a beat as Finn entered the room, hat in hand. He'd clearly made an effort with his appearance. His hair was neatly combed, his clothes clean, and he appeared freshly shaved. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Not at all," Hannah assured him, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Please sit down, Mrs. Sullivan bustled about, bringing coffee and some of her famous apple cake, before excusing herself with a transparency that made Hannah blush. "I wanted to apologize," Finn said once they were alone, save for the sleeping baby, "for not coming to check on you sooner. The ranch has kept me busy and, well," he hesitated. "Truth is, I wasn't sure you'd want to see me." Hannah looked at him in surprise. "Why wouldn't I want to see you after everything you've done for us?" Finn stared into his coffee cup. "I thought maybe I'd remind you of a difficult time. The blizzard, your husband leaving." He glanced up at her. "Sometimes people want to forget the hard parts of their past and the folks who were there to witness them." Hannah shook her head, touched by his consideration. "You're not a reminder of hardship, Mr. Blackett. You're the reason Matthew and I survived it." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Finn, please. After delivering a man's namesake, I think you can use my given name." "Finn," she agreed, returning his smile. "And I'm Hannah." They talked for hours, long after the coffee grew cold and Mrs. Sullivan had discreetly retired for the night. Hannah told him about her childhood in Illinois, her hasty marriage to Thomas after her parents died, and their journey west in search of opportunity. "Thomas changed once we got out here," she explained. "The isolation, the hard work, it wasn't what he expected. He started drinking, staying away for days at a time." Finn listened intently, his expression darkening when she described Thomas's reaction to her pregnancy. "He said a baby would ruin everything, tie us down permanently to a life he was growing to hate." "Some men aren't meant for family life," Finn observed quietly. "But that's no excuse for abandoning your responsibilities." "What about you?" Hannah asked. "You mentioned your wife and daughter. Do you ever think of having a family again?" Pain flickered across Finn's face. "For a long time, I couldn't imagine it. The pain was too raw." He glanced at the sleeping baby. "But lately, I've been wondering if maybe there's room in life for second chances." The moment hung between them, charged with possibility, until Matthew stirred in his cradle. Hannah lifted him and, without thinking, handed him to Finn when he held out his arms. "Hello there, little man," Finn murmured, cradling the baby with practiced ease. "Remember me?" As she watched the big, rough-handed cowboy gently soothing her son, something shifted in Hannah's heart. A door that had been closed since Thomas's betrayal creaked open just a fraction, allowing in a sliver of hope. February brought more snow and bitter cold to Willow Creek. Finn began visiting the boarding house regularly, always bringing small gifts: a jar of honey from the ranch cook, a hand-carved rattle for Matthew, once even a book of poetry for Hannah that he'd ridden all the way to the next town to find. The other boarders watched this developing friendship with varying degrees of interest and approval. Mrs. Sullivan was openly delighted, often finding excuses to leave Hannah and Finn alone together. Mr. Jenkins nodded sagely, remarking to anyone who would listen that the young widow deserves some happiness after all she's been through. Not everyone was so supportive. Hannah became aware of whispers in town speculation about her relationship with Finn, questions about whether her husband was truly gone or merely away temporarily, disapproval at how quickly she seemed to be moving on. "Pay them no mind," Mrs. Sullivan advised when Hannah mentioned the gossip. "Small towns run on talk. Give them a few months and they'll find someone else to whisper about." One Sunday after church services, Hannah was approached by Beatrice Caldwell, wife of the town's most prosperous merchant and self-appointed arbiter of Willow Creek society. "Mrs. Gray," she said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, "I've been meaning to speak with you about your situation." Hannah tensed. "My situation, Mrs. Caldwell? Yes, dear, your unfortunate circumstances." She lowered her voice. "I understand your husband abandoned you, which is truly deplorable. However, your frequent visits from Mr. Blackett are causing quite a stir. A young widow should be particularly careful about her reputation." Hannah felt her cheeks burn, both with embarrassment and anger. "Mr. Blackett saved my life and my son's life. He's been nothing but respectful and kind." Mrs. Caldwell patted her arm condescendingly. "I'm sure he has. However, appearances matter in a small community like ours. Without a proper divorce or proof of your husband's death, your status is ambiguous, and Mr. Blackett has something of a reputation himself, a drifter, never staying in one place too long." Before Hannah could respond, a shadow fell over them. Finn stood there, his expression carefully neutral though his eyes were hard. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, tipping his hat. "Beautiful service today, wasn't it? All that talk about not judging others lest ye be judged yourself really makes a person think." Mrs. Caldwell's face flushed crimson. "Mr. Blackett, I was just expressing concern for Mrs. Gray's well-being." "That's mighty Christian of you," Finn replied, his voice deceptively pleasant. "Mrs. Gray, may I escort you and Matthew home? It looks like snow's coming in." Hannah gladly accepted his arm, leaving Mrs. Caldwell standing open-mouthed behind them. "I'm sorry about that," Finn said once they were out of earshot. "Small-town folks can be quick to judge." "She wasn't entirely wrong," Hannah admitted reluctantly. "I am in an unusual situation. Thomas could return someday, claiming his rights as my husband." Finn's jaw tightened. "Do you think he will?" "No," Hannah said with certainty. "Thomas wanted freedom more than anything. He won't come back to claim a wife and child he never wanted." They walked in silence for a moment before Finn spoke again. "Would you want him to come back, I mean?" Hannah looked down at Matthew, sleeping peacefully in his sling against her chest, then up at Finn's worried expression. "No," she said softly. "That part of my life is over." Relief washed over Finn's face, followed by determination. "Hannah, there's something I need to tell you." I've been offered a permanent position at the Rockingham Foreman, starting in the spring." "Finn, that's wonderful," Hannah exclaimed. "It means I'd be staying in Willow Creek. Permanently." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "I've been a drifter since I lost my family. Never thought I'd want to put down roots again. But lately, I've been thinking that maybe it's time." Hannah's heart pounded in her chest. "Why now?" Finn's gaze was steady, honest. "Because for the first time in 5 years, I've found someone worth staying for." The implication hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to speak it aloud but both feeling its weight and promise. As March arrived, bringing the first hints of spring to Montana, Hannah found herself at a crossroads. Her boarding arrangement with Mrs. Sullivan was coming to an end, and she needed to make decisions about her future. "You could stay on, of course," Mrs. Sullivan offered, "but you'll need regular income. There's talk of the hotel needing a cook, and you've certainly proven your skills in my kitchen." The idea appealed to Hannah. A job would give her independence, something she'd never truly had. But there were complications. "What about Matthew? I can't work all day and care for him too." "I'd be happy to mind him while you're working," Mrs. Sullivan assured her. "I miss having little ones about." Another option presented itself when Pastor Roberts approached her after Sunday services. "Mrs. Gray, the school committee has been discussing the need for a teacher for the younger children next fall. I remember you mentioning you taught briefly back east." It was true before her marriage. Hannah had worked as an assistant in a country school in Illinois. The prospect of teaching again excited her, though it would mean months of uncertainty before the position began. Finn, too, had suggestions when she shared her dilemma during one of his visits. "The ranch owner's wife mentioned they need help with their new baby," he told her. "Live-in position, good pay, and you could have Matthew with you." "At the ranch where you work?" Hannah asked, unable to hide her interest. Finn nodded, a slight flush coloring his weathered cheeks. "Would mean we'd see each other more often." The possibility made her heart flutter, but she hesitated. Working at the ranch would put her under Finn's protection in the eyes of the town. The gossip would only intensify. Hannah was mulling over these options one afternoon while walking through town. Matthew bundled against her in the carrier Finn had fashioned for her. Lost in thought, she nearly collided with a man on the boardwalk outside the general store. "Excuse me," she began, then froze as she looked up into a familiar face one she'd hoped never to see again. Thomas Gray stood before her, thinner and more weathered than when he'd left, but unmistakably her husband. His eyes widened in shock as he took in the sight of her and the baby. "Hannah," he said, his voice rough. "So you had the child." Hannah instinctively tightened her hold on Matthew. "What are you doing here, Thomas?" He glanced around nervously. "Can we talk somewhere private?" Every instinct warned against it, but Hannah nodded curtly. "The park across the street." "It's public enough." Once seated on a bench, with Matthew now awake and watching his surroundings with curious eyes, Hannah turned to Thomas. "You abandoned us in a blizzard. You said you wanted nothing to do with us. Why are you back?" Thomas had the grace to look ashamed. "I was drunk. Angry. I never should have left you like that." He ran a hand through his unkempt hair. "I've been working at a logging camp up north, trying to make enough money to start over." "Start over," Hannah repeated flatly. "And what does that mean for us?" Thomas eyed the baby uncertainly. Is he mine?" The question stung like a slap. "Yes, Thomas. This is your son, Matthew, born during the blizzard the night after you left. We nearly died." Guilt flickered across Thomas's face. "I'm sorry, Hannah, truly," he hesitated. "I've changed. The work up north was hard, but it cleared my head, made me realize what's important." Hannah studied the man she had once loved, trying to see evidence of this claimed transformation. He looked sober, at least, and genuinely remorseful. "What do you want from me, Thomas?" He reached for her hand, which she withdrew. "Another chance. Come back to me, Hannah. We can be a family, the three of us." The words she'd once longed to hear now filled her with dread. Before she could respond, a shadow fell across them. Looking up, she saw Finn standing there, his expression thunderous as he took in the scene. "Everything all right here, Hannah?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled, though she could sense the tension in him. Thomas stood, defensive. "Who are you?" "Finn Blackett," he answered, not offering his hand. "Friend of Mrs. Gray and her son." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "Mrs. Gray is my wife, and that's my son. This is a private family matter." The two men stared at each other, the hostility palpable. Hannah rose quickly. Matthew clutched to her chest. "Finn, this is Thomas Gray, my husband," she said, the word feeling strange on her tongue. "He's just returned to town." Understanding dawned in Finn's eyes, followed by a pain that broke Hannah's heart. He backed away slightly, his expression closing off. "I see," he said stiffly. "I apologize for interrupting your reunion, Mrs. Gray." The formality cut deep. With a nod to Thomas, Finn turned and walked away, his shoulders rigid. Hannah wanted to call after him to explain, but what could she say? Legally, she was still Thomas's wife. The complications of her situation crashed down upon her with fresh intensity. Thomas, oblivious to her inner turmoil, pressed his advantage. "I've taken a room at the hotel. Think about what I said, Hannah, for our son's sake, if nothing else." That evening, back at the boarding house, Hannah paced the floor of her room, Matthew finally asleep after a fussy afternoon. Her mind was in chaos. Thomas's return had thrown everything into question. As much as she wanted to dismiss him outright, wasn't she obligated to consider his offer? For Matthew's sake, shouldn't she at least try to rebuild their family? But then there was Finn, steady, kind, honorable Finn, who had become so much more than a rescuer to her. In his presence, she'd begun to imagine a different kind of future. One built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than desperation and obligation. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Mrs. Sullivan looking concerned. "Mr. Blackett is here to see you," the older woman said. "He seems quite upset." Hannah found Finn waiting in the parlor, hat in hand, his expression grim. "I'm sorry to come by so late," he began. "I just needed to." He trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. Hannah gestured for him to sit. "It's all right, I'm glad you came." Finn remained standing. "Your husband's back." It wasn't a question, but Hannah nodded anyway. "Yes. Does he want you back?" "You and the baby, he says he does, says he's changed." Hannah couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. Finn's laugh was humorless. "Men like that don't change, Hannah. They just find new ways to cover their true nature." "You don't know him," Hannah said, though without conviction. "I know he left his pregnant wife alone in a blizzard." "Left her to die?" Finn's voice shook with barely controlled anger. "What kind of man does that? And what kind of man comes back only when the hard part is over?" His words struck home because they echoed her own doubts. "He's still Matthew's father." "Being a father is more than just blood," Finn insisted. "It's about being there day in and day out. It's about putting that child's needs above your own always." They stood in tense silence until Finn spoke again, his voice softer. "Hannah, I have no right to tell you what to do. You're a free woman despite what the law might say about marriage vows, but he took a deep breath. "I care for you more than I should, perhaps, and I care for that boy like he was my own." Hannah's heart swelled at his confession. "Finn," he held up a hand to stop her. "Don't say anything now. You have a lot to think about, decisions to make." He placed his hat on his head, preparing to leave. "Just be careful, Hannah, and know that whatever you decide, I'll respect it." As he turned to go, Hannah caught his arm. "Finn, wait. There's something you should know." She met his gaze directly. Whatever happens with Thomas, my feelings for you won't change. What's grown between us these past months is real, more real than anything I felt in my marriage." Finn's expression softened, hope flickering in his eyes. He covered her hand with his own. "Think about what's best for you and Matthew. That's all I ask." After he left, Hannah sat alone in the parlor for a long time, her mind clearer than it had been all day. She knew what she had to do. The next morning, Hannah arranged to meet Thomas at the hotel restaurant. He smiled when she entered, rising to pull out her chair, but his face fell when he saw she hadn't brought the baby. "I thought I'd meet my son properly," he said, disappointment evident. "That's what I want to talk to you about," Hannah replied, her resolve firm. "Matthew is with Mrs. Sullivan. I wanted to speak with you alone." Thomas nodded, though he looked wary. "Why did you really come back, Thomas?" Hannah asked directly. He shifted uncomfortably. "I told you, I've changed. I want to make things right." "Is it because you truly want a family, or because you heard about the new silver strike near Willow Creek?" Hannah had overheard talk at the general store about prospectors flooding into the area following a recent discovery. Thomas's expression confirmed her suspicion before he could deny it. "The silver is part of it," he admitted reluctantly. "But that doesn't mean I don't want to try again with you and the boy." Hannah studied him, seeing him clearly perhaps for the first time. Thomas Gray was not an evil man, just a weak one. A man who took the easy path, who blamed others for his failures, who ran when things got difficult. "I want a divorce, Thomas," she said quietly but firmly. He stared at her in shock. "A divorce? You know what that means." "The scandal, the stigma." "I know exactly what it means," Hannah interrupted. "It means freedom for both of us. You don't really want a wife and child, Thomas. You want respectability without responsibility, and I want more than a husband who sees me as an obligation." Thomas's shock gave way to anger. "Is this about that cowboy, Blackett? Are you throwing away our marriage for him?" "This is about me," Hannah said calmly, "about what I want for myself and my son. Finn showed me that I deserve better than what we had, but this decision is mine." "I could fight you," Thomas threatened. "Take the boy. The law would side with me." Hannah's heart raced with fear, but she kept her voice steady. "You could try, but ask yourself this. Do you really want to raise a child alone? Are you prepared for the daily work of fatherhood? Or do you just want to punish me for choosing my own path?" Thomas fell silent, his bluster fading as the reality of what he was threatening sank in. "I don't want to keep Matthew from knowing his father," Hannah continued, softening her tone. "You can visit him, be part of his life. But our marriage is over, Thomas. It has been since the night you walked out on us." They talked for another hour, the conversation sometimes heated, sometimes resigned. In the end, Thomas agreed to file for divorce on grounds of desertion, his desertion, with the date altered to make it seem longer than it had been, a fiction that would make the process simpler in the eyes of the territorial courts. "I'll be staying in the area for a while," Thomas said as they prepared to part. "The silver strike is real, and I aim to make my fortune this time." Hannah nodded, feeling an odd mix of sadness and relief. Despite everything, she had once loved this man, had built dreams around a future with him. "I wish you well, Thomas, truly." As she left the hotel, Hannah felt as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The path ahead would not be easy. Divorce carried serious social consequences, especially for a woman, but for the first time in years. She was making choices for herself rather than merely reacting to circumstances thrust upon her. She walked straight to the Rockingham Ranch, 5 miles outside of town. By the time she arrived, her feet were sore and she was second-guessing her impulsiveness, but it was too late to turn back. A ranch hand directed her to the bunkhouse, where she found Finn mending tack, his expression brightening then growing cautious when he saw her. "Hannah, is everything all right? Where's Matthew?" "He's with Mrs. Sullivan," she assured him. "I needed to see you to tell you something important." Finn set aside his work, giving her his full attention. "What is it?" "I met with Thomas this morning," she began, watching his face carefully. "I told him I want a divorce." Finn's expression remained neutral, though she could see the hope he was trying to contain. "Are you sure that's what you want?" "More sure than I've been about anything in a long time," Hannah confirmed. Thomas agreed. "It will take time, but eventually I'll be free." She stepped closer to him. "Free to make my own choices about my future and Matthew's." Finn stood, moving toward her almost unconsciously. "And what kind of future are you thinking about, Hannah Gray?" She looked up at him, her heart full. "One with purpose. Independence," she smiled. "And love if I'm fortunate enough to find it again." "I think you might be very fortunate indeed," Finn said softly, reaching out to take her hands in his. "There will be talk," Hannah warned. "More than before. A divorced woman with a child." "Let them talk," Finn said dismissively. "What matters is that you're following your heart, doing what's right for you and Matthew." Hannah squeezed his hands. "I should get back to town, to my son." Finn nodded, though he didn't release her hands. "Hannah, I want to court you properly, once your situation is settled if you're willing." Joy bubbled up within her. "I'd like that very much." Summer arrived in Montana with long, sunny days and fields bursting with wildflowers. Hannah's divorce proceedings were underway, though it would be months before they were finalized. Thomas had kept his word, signing the necessary papers before heading into the mountains with a prospecting party. Hannah had taken the teaching position at the town school, which would begin in September. In the meantime, she'd found work helping Mrs. Peterson, the doctor's wife, with their 4 young children. The arrangement allowed her to keep Matthew with her and provided enough income for her to rent a small cottage on the edge of town. True to his word, Finn courted her properly. He called at her cottage every Sunday, bringing flowers or small gifts for Matthew. They attended church together, went on picnics by the creek when weather permitted, and slowly built a relationship based on mutual respect and deepening affection. The town's reaction was mixed. Some, like Mrs. Caldwell, maintained a chilly disapproval. Others, seeing Hannah's determination to build a respectable life for herself and her child, gradually warmed to her. Finn's position as foreman at the respected Rockingham Ranch lent them both a measure of legitimacy that helped ease their way. On a perfect July evening, with the sun setting behind the mountains and casting golden light across the valley, Finn took Hannah and Matthew on a special outing. He drove them in the ranch buggy to a beautiful spot overlooking Willow Creek, where he'd arranged a picnic dinner. After they'd eaten, while Matthew played with wooden blocks on the blanket between them, Finn grew uncharacteristically serious. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," he began. "About what I want for the years ahead." Hannah's heart quickened. "And what have you decided?" "That I'm tired of living half a life," he said simply. "For 5 years I've been going through the motions, never letting myself get too attached to people or places." His gaze softened as it moved from her to Matthew and back. "You've changed that for me, both of you. Made me want to build something lasting." From his pocket, he withdrew a small box. "I know your divorce isn't final yet and will have to wait, but I wanted you to know my intentions." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small pearl. "This was my mother's. I'd be honored if you'd wear it someday as my wife." Tears filled Hannah's eyes. "Finn Blackett, are you asking me to marry you?" "I am," he confirmed, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "I love you, Hannah, and I love that boy of yours like he was my own blood. I want to be a family, the 3 of us." Hannah took the box from his hands, her fingers trembling. "Yes," she said simply. "When the time is right, I will marry you." Finn's smile was radiant as he leaned forward to seal their promise with a kiss, gentle and full of hope for their future. That promise would be tested in the months that followed. Hannah's divorce became a subject of town controversy when Pastor Roberts questioned whether the church could recognize such a dissolution. Some parents threatened to withdraw their children from her class before she'd even begun teaching. Finn faced challenges too. Some of the ranch hands, particularly the older ones, made it clear they disapproved of him courting a married woman, regardless of her pending divorce. The ranch owner stood by him, but tensions on the property grew. Then, in late August, came the news that changed everything. Thomas Gray had been killed in a mining accident in the mountains. A tunnel collapse had claimed the lives of 3 prospectors, his body among those recovered. Hannah received the news with complex emotion, sadness for the man she had once loved, relief that Matthew would be spared the confusion of a father who drifted in and out of his life, guilt for feeling that relief. The town's reaction was equally complex. Some viewed Thomas's death as divine judgment, others as a tragic reminder of the dangers frontier life presented. For Hannah, it simplified her legal situation as a widow rather than a divorcee. Her path forward would face fewer obstacles, but complicated her emotional one. "I feel like I should mourn him more deeply," she confessed to Finn one evening as they sat on her cottage porch, Matthew already asleep inside. "He was my husband, after all, the father of my child." Finn took her hand gently. "Grief doesn't follow rules, Hannah. You mourned the loss of your marriage long before Thomas died. You've made your peace with that part of your life." She leaned against his solid shoulder, drawing comfort from his presence. "What happens now?" "That depends on you," Finn said cautiously. "As a widow, you're free to remarry whenever you choose, but if you need time—" Hannah silenced him with a finger to his lips. "I've had time enough. Life is too short and too uncertain to waste it waiting." She looked up at him, her decision made. "I want to marry you, Finn Blackett, as soon as is proper." October brought the first frost to Willow Creek, painting the landscape in vibrant reds and golds. It also brought Hannah and Finn's wedding day, a simple ceremony in the town church with Matthew, now 10 months old and taking his first wobbly steps, as their most honored guest. Mrs. Sullivan cried openly throughout the ceremony. Dr. and Mrs. Peterson beamed from the front pew, their own children squirming beside them. Even Mrs. Caldwell attended, her presence a tacit acknowledgement that Hannah had earned her place in the community. Pastor Roberts, who had initially been reluctant to perform the ceremony for a widow remarrying so soon, had been won over by Finn's steady character and Hannah's obvious devotion to both him and her son. His sermon spoke of second chances and the grace that allows broken hearts to heal and find new joy. As Hannah and Finn exchanged vows, she thought of the night that had brought them together, the blizzard that had nearly claimed her and Matthew's lives, but had instead delivered them into the care of the man who would become her true partner. The contrast between that desperate night and this joyful day seemed miraculous. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Pastor Roberts declared, his voice carrying through the small church. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Finn leaned down to kiss her, his touch gentle and reverent. The assembled townspeople applauded, and little Matthew reached up from Mrs. Sullivan's arms, recognizing this moment as important even if he didn't understand why. The celebration moved to the town hall, where a feast awaited. The women of Willow Creek had outdone themselves, preparing enough food to feed the entire community. Music played, couples danced, and children ran laughing between the tables. Late in the evening, as the party continued around them, Finn drew Hannah outside for a moment of quiet together. "I have something to tell you," he said, his expression a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "I've been waiting for the right time." Hannah looked up at her new husband, still marveling that this good man was now hers. "What is it?" "I bought land," Finn announced. "A small ranch about 3 miles outside of town. Previous owner was heading back east, needed to sell quickly." He watched her face anxiously. "It's not much yet, the house needs work and there's only a small herd to start with. But it's ours, free and clear, a place to build our future." Hannah threw her arms around him, joy bubbling up inside her. "Our own ranch. Oh, Finn, it's perfect." "You haven't seen it yet," he cautioned, though he was smiling. "It's going to be a lot of work." "Work doesn't frighten me," Hannah assured him. "Not when we're doing it together." They moved into their new home the following week. The ranch house was indeed in need of repairs. The roof leaked in 3 places, the porch sagged, and the kitchen stove smoked alarmingly, but to Hannah, it was perfect. It was theirs, a place where she could raise her son and build a life with the man she loved. Winter came early that year, the first heavy snow falling before Thanksgiving. As Hannah stood at the kitchen window watching the white flakes swirling outside, she couldn't help but think of another snowstorm, nearly a year before, that had changed the course of her life. Finn came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about, Mrs. Blackett?" The name still sent a thrill through her. "About how different this winter is from the last." He tightened his hold on her, understanding. No more blizzards alone in a cabin. Hannah turned in his arms to face him. No more fear or uncertainty. She stretched up to kiss him softly. "Just us, our son, and the future we're building." From the next room came the sound of Matthew's babbling as he played in his pen. Hannah smiled at the happy noise. "Speaking of our son, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you." Finn raised an eyebrow. "Oh, Matthew's growing so fast, I was thinking." She hesitated, suddenly nervous. "I was thinking he might like a little brother or sister someday, not too far in the future." Finn's face lit up with joy. "I think that's a fine idea, Mrs. Blackett." A very fine idea indeed. As they held each other in the warm kitchen, the snow falling gently outside, Hannah felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. Life on the frontier was hard. There would always be storms to weather, challenges to overcome, but she no longer faced them alone. The following spring brought new life to their small ranch. The pastures turned green, wildflowers dotted the hills, and Hannah discovered she was expecting their first child together. "A Christmas baby," Finn said with wonder when she told him the news, laying his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Matthew will be almost 2 by then, old enough to be a proper big brother." Matthew, who had taken to calling Finn Papa without any prompting, thrived in their new home. He followed Finn everywhere, tottering after him on sturdy legs as the patient cowboy went about his ranch work, explaining everything he did to his attentive young shadow. Hannah continued teaching at the town school, at least until her pregnancy advanced. The position had become a source of pride and purpose for her, separate from her roles as wife and mother. Finn supported her completely, often taking care of Matthew in the afternoons so she could prepare her lessons. Their ranch slowly prospered under Finn's careful management. They added to their small cattle herd, planted a substantial vegetable garden, and even began raising chickens. The house, too, improved with their constant work: a new roof, a reinforced porch, fresh paint inside and out. Neighbors who had initially been skeptical of the young family gradually came to respect their determination and work ethic. The Blackett Ranch became known as a welcoming place, where travelers could count on a hot meal and good company. On Christmas Eve 1880, as a gentle snow fell outside their snug ranch house. Hannah gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named James Sullivan Blackett, in honor of the woman who had been like a mother to Hannah during her darkest days. As Finn held their newborn son while Matthew peered curiously at his new brother, Hannah felt her heart might burst with happiness. The contrast between this peaceful birth, surrounded by love and support, and Matthew's dramatic entry into the world during a raging blizzard could not have been more profound. "Two sons," Finn said wonderingly, looking from the baby in his arms to the toddler leaning against his knee. "How did I get so blessed?" Hannah watched her family with tired eyes but a full heart. "We blessed each other," she said simply. "When you found me that night, you saved more than just our lives. You showed me what love truly means." Finn leaned down to kiss her forehead gently. "No, Hannah. You saved me. I was just existing before you and Matthew. Now I'm living again." Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside their home, warmth and love created a sanctuary against whatever storms life might bring their way. From the darkest night of Hannah's life had come the brightest dawn, a family built on choice rather than obligation, on love freely given and gratefully received. Years would pass, and the Blackett family would grow. Two more children would join them, a daughter, Sarah, named for Finn's first wife, and another son, William. Their ranch would prosper, becoming one of the most successful in the valley. Matthew would grow up strong and capable, never knowing anything but Finn's steadfast fatherly love, the truth of his birth, a story told with honesty but without bitterness. And on cold winter nights, when the wind howled around their sturdy home, Hannah and Finn would sometimes share a look of quiet understanding, remembering the blizzard that had brought them together, and the journey they had traveled since, from strangers thrust together by circumstance to partners bound by the deepest love, building a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. For Hannah, who had once faced the darkest night alone and afraid, there could be no greater happiness than this life they had forged together, a life built on courage, second chances, and the unwavering belief that even in the heart of a blizzard, hope can be found if you're brave enough to open the door.